Hi guys, welcome to the summer tree workshop. So as many of you know, I do a winter tree workshop and where we look at buds and how to identify broadleaf trees in the winter, and now we're going to have a go at looking at them in the summertime. I'm sorry we can't be with each other in person, but hopefully this virtual kind of workshop will be of service to you and of service to the trees. Right, so what are the things that we want to consider when we're looking at trees, broadleaf trees in the summertime? Now, the first thing that's really important that I say to all my students when we're IDing any plants is habitat. Are you in the middle of a city? Are you in the middle of the metropolis where cities are as biodiverse ethnically as they can be biologically? And so if you're in the middle of New York, Tokyo or London, you could be looking at a tree that has brought from anywhere around the world that will survive in that latitude. So do think about where are you, because a tree that you're going to see in the centre of Glasgow is not necessarily going to be the same type of tree that you're going to see up in a remote, beautiful native woodland in the Highlands of Scotland. So habitat, very important. Then you want to look at maybe what might help is the height and the shape of your tree. If you look at the height and the shape, you're all of a sudden going to be able to rule out many species that you might be considering. So for instance, one of my students once was standing in front of a lime tree, which they get very big. I think they get up to about 35 meters, and was standing there doing a demonstration and saying to me and giving a lovely talk all about a hazel. Now hazels get usually about up to maybe 10 meters. So, and I can understand perfectly why he was making that mistake, because the leaves are quite similar. But if you know the height of your tree, then you can actually sort of help kind of cut out any options that you think it might be or not be. The one thing to remember with height and to a degree shape is, do you think your tree is young or old? Because obviously when a tree is young, it's going to look very different to when it's older. And then we're going to look for some things which we would be looking at on the winter tree ID workshop is the bark. And remember, young or old, the buds. And again, I would say, be mindful of, is this tree young or old? Or what time of the year are you looking at the buds? This is more winter tree ID stuff, but the buds can change colour throughout the season, and some of the ID books will only give you the ID at the beginning of the year or towards the end, and that's where you can't get away from your dirt time, which my students know I love talking about, is just getting out and observing and getting closer and more intimate with nature. You will start noticing these little variances that it's pretty impossible for botanists to write down every single variance, because there may be just a local variance to you, not worldwide or nationally. So the other thing we're going to look at, is flower. And of some of the smaller trees, you can definitely get a good look at the flowers, and they're just lovely to look at. And some of the bigger trees, they're lovely to look at. If you get one that's got a limb lower down that you can manage to get up. But we're not going to look at those today. Okay, and so then there are, which is what we're going to look at more today, are the leaves. And we're going to talk a bit more about the leaves in a minute, the shapes of the leaves. And there's going to be details in the leaves that we want to look at. It's not just the shape, but also any details like hairs, or small glands, any other markings on the leaves. venation as well, actually. So we'll look at this a little bit more, the details on the leaves. And then overall, which you'll see more, we've got to look at the twigs, but also on the twigs, on the bark, any other details, lenticels, which are the breathing apparatus of the trees, again hairs on the twigs, etc., and colour, of course. Of course, you can also identify broadleaf trees by their fruit and by their seeds. Okay, let's now look at the leaves. So this will hopefully help you ID your trees and also just become a bit more familiar with some of the terminology that you might find in the ID books. So, basic leaf structure, you'll be surprised, but here we have our stem. And often what people will call a stalk here is part of what some guidebooks call the leaf. And this bit is called the petiole. Okay, so if you are looking in a guidebook and it says the leaf, it's often including the petiole, so it's quite handy to be aware of that. Then here we have what often is called the blade, or it's sometimes called the lamina, and sometimes botany books will call this just the leaf and not the petiole, but often when they're talking about the leaf they mean everything including the petiole. Then at the bottom of the petiole, not always, but sometimes on either side or one side, you'll have something that's called the stipules. And these are leafy-like appendages at the bottom that are protecting a bud. I'm going to do that actually in a different colour if I can find it. Yeah. So here we have a bud. Okay, and it is this bud here that makes this a simple leaf. As opposed to what we're going to do over here is a compound leaf. Now a compound leaf is, again, we have the stem, we have a petiole, and sometimes you might have stipules at the bottom, and you'll have your bud, your auxiliary bud. But then going up, the stem, the petiole, turns into a rachis or a rachis. Okay. So here we have some leaflets. Okay, and then you might have a terminal leaflet here, and this is what we call a compound leaf. So when you are looking in your ID books and they say the leaflets are serrated, they're talking about these. Or if they're talking about that the leaf is 15 centimetres, they're talking about this whole thing here. That is the leaf in a compound leaf. That's the whole thing here, is the compound leaf, and these are leaflets. So hopefully that will be really helpful for you. Some other things that you need to look at as well is the venation. And that will be the same on the leaflets as well as it will be on a simple leaf. So the venation can be, so this formula of a compound leaf is called a pinnate leaf. So this one is called a pinnate leaf. Okay. And that's because it's divided once. Now, some believe that the reason we have compound leaves like this, it's actually kind of an evolutionary objective, if you like, of the leaf, which is to minimise herbivory, because if something's munching this, it has to kind of jump from one little leaflet to the other, and also to maximise surface area for photosynthesis. So, but this is once pinnate. But you have other types of compound leaves. You have some that are trifoliate, and you probably are already thinking of this, which is great. So let's think of 3. But if you think something like a clover or something like the strawberries, they are trifoliate leaves. Okay. And then you might have also a palmate leaf, which is, as the name implies, like a palm. And so you'll have your petiole, and then off the centre you'll have maybe some long leaves like this. This is like something like our horse chestnut. Things you want to consider with your leaves as well are the edges of your leaves or your leaflets. So are the edge of the leaflet or the edge of your leaves, are they entire? So here, for instance, here, there's no serrations, that means entire. But sometimes there's serrations, and sometimes those serrations, for instance, can be like this, like teeth going forward, and that's serrated. Sometimes they can be like a kind of bumpy, like this. Like if you think about primroses, they're like that. And that's crenate. And then also if you've got teeth like this, dentate. We also have the shape of the leaf as well. Sometimes it can be lobed. So we have a simple leaf, but it's lobed. It looks like maybe your oaks. And we also have other different shapes, like you need to consider at the base of the leaf. Is the base of the leaf this shape? Is it rounded? Or is it truncate? Does it go straight across? Like here we've got birch. So here we've got a truncate base of the leaf with a birch straight across. Now this means that this is leaning towards a silver birch. I'm not going to do birch with this summer tree ID, because I've done a little separate movie on birch, so you can click and find that on YouTube. But that will be truncate. And then you've got diamond shapes at the bottom. Don't worry too much about these names. They'll sink in the more and more you use any of the ID books. Some of them try and as much as possible to avoid some of these more botanese words, and they won't use, like one of my favourites is cordate. So cordate, and I think because we just see it a lot, is like a heart, an upside down heart, and we see that a lot in many of our broadleaf trees. With time you'll just they'll sink in, and again it's just a lovely way to stop and stare. And the most important thing to take away from this is the simple leaf and the compound leaf. That is the most important thing, because that really will throw you when you're out in the field. And the main detail to know, is it compound, is look for this auxiliary bud. So there you have it, just a little introduction in how to identify broadleaf trees in the summertime. I hope that's of help, and please be aware that there are many other morphological features that you can look at, and it really is just a taste. And so, for instance, right behind me I have some poplar trees, and walking by I had a feeling I was walking by poplar trees before I saw them, because I could hear them, and the wind just catches them because their petiole is actually not fully round, it's got some flat edges, so the wind catches the leaf and they flutter in the wind, and therefore you get this kind of rustling sound more when you're around poplars. So there you have it. I look forward to seeing you in part 2, and thank you for joining me.